So, with Republicans giving Reaganomics yet another attempt, I found this New York Times piece. It's from 2009, so it's a little old. And the subject is even older. But essentially, it goes to show you that it's called Reaganomics, but not even the man that's named after could really get it to work. This bill is the most important legislation for financial institutes in the last 50 years. It provides a long-term solution for troubled thrift institutions. All in all, I think we hit the jackpot. So declared Ronald Reagan in 1982 as he signed the Grant St. Germain Depository Institution Act. He was, as it happened, wrong about solving the problems of the thrift. On the contrary, the bill turned the modest-sized trouble of the savings and loans industry into the utter catastrophic. But he was right about the legislation's significance. And as for the jackpot, well, it finally came more than 25 years later in the form of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Okay. So, what is this essentially saying? It's essentially saying, and the article goes on to say this, I'd recommend giving it a read. It's a good read. That what happened was Reagan, did what Reagan did, and that was he deregulated the banks, and he also did massive tax cuts, which blew up the deficit beyond any belief. He hit a $3 trillion national debt when he left office in 1989. Under Carter, the debt was $900 billion, I believe. That is more than... And then Clinton had to come along to balance it. Oh, Democrats are so fiscal irresponsibility. Yeah, well, we balanced the budget. You notched up to over $1 trillion. Twice in a row, by the way, under Reagan and under Bush. But anyway. So what happened was, essentially Reagan did what he did. He deregulated. And that led to a few different things. One of those was, of course, the savings and loans crash, which was the worst crash at the time since the Great Depression. And that happened not because of any legislation Jimmy Carter ever proposed, but because of banksters who were using methods that, a lot of people don't know this, several of the methods that led to the savings and loans crash were illegal before Reagan came into office. He legalized several forms of what were before considered fraud because, he just started chipping away at the New Deal banking regulations. Him and the first George Bush, and then Clinton essentially just repealed the whole thing. And then, under the second George Bush, when he was continuing doing those policies, by the way, I've always found it kind of funny that George W. Bush's presidency could be more considered a follow-up to Reagan's presidency than to the presidency of George W. Bush's own father. Just one of those things I find kind of amusing. But anyway, you have things like that, like the savings, and then that led to the housing market collapse and the Great Recession, because what happened was the banks went to George Bush and said, well, we failed, and then he said, well, okay, here's $700 billion. And all of that started because Ronald Reagan wanted to deregulate. And when it started blowing up in his face and the savings and loans crash, he didn't do anything. George H.W. Bush had to have his arm twisted into doing anything. He said in, I think it was either one of his campaign speeches or his inauguration speech, that he wasn't ever going to raise taxes. He had to, because, the economy was just doing so bad for so long that we were essentially in a recession. Well, not essentially, we were in. And again, all of that can be traced back to the man Reaganomics is named after, Ronald Reagan. And Republicans are sitting there going, let's try this again for a third time. Well, Actually, technically a fourth, because you could say Coolidge tried it. Um, but yeah, because this is what they do. And don't get me wrong, it's not even like it's bad for everyone. I'll say right now, Reaganomics is great for some people. Those people mainly being the billionaires who get their taxes cut. Meanwhile, everyone else gets theirs raised. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to say that. I'm Ephrom, and good night.